Welcome, everybody. I am incredibly excited to welcome Herman Singh. I like to call him Professor Herman Singh because it just gives that nice intellectual rigorousness and background. But if you go to his website, which I'll include the link to his bio, you'll see that we are sitting today with really the Mozart of academia and business. At 19, you were already graduating from university at WITS and starting your stellar career that led you, what I see online, to be very much also involved in the SMEs and startups. And tell us a little bit about your background. Give us a tour de force of your background.
Look, I've been working for 40 years, right? So it's a long background. I'm basically an engineer. I always say to people, my career of 40 years is split in two 20-year chunks. The first 20 years of my career was spent building the industrial infrastructure of Africa. You know, building pipelines, building mines, big material handling plants, beneficiation plants, automating these plants, aluminium, steel, you know, oil refineries, sugar mills. I mean, I can carry on. So hundreds of projects in 20 years, including building power stations. And the second 20 years of my career, I spent building commercial infrastructure, from internet banking to media platforms to e-commerce platforms. So half my career was spent building industrial platforms, and the other half of my career was spent building commercial platforms. And in the process, I've always been an entrepreneur on my own. So even though I've held corporate jobs, I've always run my own businesses as well. So it gave me a very unusual feeling, because I've had this strong and very deep corporate career. I've also had a very strong SME career and startup career. And finally, I've also had a very strong academic career, because I've also been a professor at 2 business schools, written a number of textbooks and other books. And basically, I love teaching as part of what I do. So that's me in a nutshell. Basically, I'm an engineer, and I like building things, and I like building businesses.
But and this is so important about what you said. And it's one of the, and kind of the reason for today's meeting for you watching is really Entrepreneurship Unplugged, because if you follow Herman, I'll put his LinkedIn profile so you can see, if you follow his post, you really get the uncensored view, opinionated, no sugar-coated perspective. And you know, how you split your 40-year career is so indicative, in my perspective, of the problem that most entrepreneurs face. They spend too much focusing on building their service or their products and not enough on the commercial element, in the commercial side. What is your view around entrepreneurship, or entrepreneurs rather, focus?
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, I mean, basically, entrepreneurs are trying to solve a societal need. So the ability to find the need and match it with your capabilities and to make money by fulfilling that need is a key to any business. In the startup world, I like saying that and this comes out of design thinking. Successful businesses occur and successful startups occur when you get a product market fit. So in other words, the thing that you've designed fits with the need that the market has, and you can deliver this at scale at a profit. So when you can do that, you have a business. And I think that the part of the problem is people fall in love with the proposition without checking to see whether the market actually needs it. And you know, I remember watching in the year 99 and 2000, watching that build-up of .coms. You know, they went from .com to .bomb to .gone. And at one stage, I think there were 400 .coms going bust globally every day after the bubble burst. And the main reason for that was there was too much money chasing too few ideas. And we have it right now. In fact, right now, the startup community has too much money chasing too many ideas. And in a way, the pandemic's a good thing. It's a good thing because it's like, you know, I live in Africa. In Africa, we have a veld fire, bushfire, and bushfires are good things. They destroy the felt, but they also clean up all the rubbish. And, you know, and that's what you actually need. And so the part of the problem you have is entrepreneurs fall in love with an idea. And I've met people who've tried for 15 years to plug something. And the fact of the matter is that what they're trying to sell isn't going to be bought, because you've got to look at both sides, the sell side and the buy side. And if you don't have a compelling value proposition, no, you know, you're not going to be successful. And even if you have a compelling value proposition, if you can't build an operation that can deliver that at scale, you also can't make money. So this combination of a product market fit with the ability to scale at a profit is the key. And I'll be honest, most people miss one of those elements, of those four elements of product, market, scaling, and, you know, cost efficiency and cost effective operations. If you can't get those four elements right, you really have a serious problem.
And it's, I love that what you're saying, but too many, and you worked with a lot of startups as well. Too many of the phenomenal, you know, half glass full per entrepreneurs that we meet kind of go, yeah, I get all that, but if only I had money, my business would be successful. What's your argument around that?
So, I mean, I have a huge problem with that, just in general, right? Because the model that really appeals to me, and we have to be careful because this model doesn't work everywhere, but the model that I do like is the lean startup model. And the lean startup model basically says you don't get money. You don't get money until you meet a series of very specific milestones. So, you know, you have to first get proof of concept. It might be proof of idea, then it might be proof of concept, then it might be proof of product. Then you might get proof of market, and then you might get proof of scale, and then you get to proof of profit. Okay, and so basically there's a sequence. And if you give someone too much money too early, they will basically blow that money, in my experience. And so the trick with most of these is to address the risks in your business model early. And as you eliminate risks in your business model, your business becomes worth more. It's worth more. It becomes more valuable. And so if you can move from, here's an idea, or show me your idea. Well, it's on PowerPoint. Okay, that's an idea. Then you move from idea to concept. You say, oh, okay, now what I've done is I've taken the idea and I've built a business case. You know, I've taken the business model canvas and I've built a business model canvas. And I can show you on paper that this works. Well, that's interesting. That's a proof of concept. And then you want to move to proof of product, which says, look, I've gone and built this thing and I've actually run it with 500 customers and they love it. Now you've got proof of product. You say, well, actually, I can prove that this is technically viable. Then the next question becomes, well, okay, is there a market big enough to make this viable, right? Because what you want to do is find a market of 1 billion. You don't want to serve niche markets in everything that you do. And that requires that you then take your product and you launch it more broadly. And as you launch it more broadly, you start to prove that, hey, there's a market for this. And then finally, you need to get to proof of scale. And proof of scale says, well, I can do this with 1 million customers. Because when you get to proof of scale, you say, well, okay, I've got a product that the market needs that I can scale. And then the next question becomes, can you make money doing this? Because there are lots of startups that are burning cash and growing fast. And so the beauty about this approach that I've given you is it limits the amount of money that you get. You know, if you can't get the idea right, you'll pivot and pivot and pivot at idea before we give you more money. Then we'll give you money to go from idea to concept. Then you get money to go from concept to product, etc. All the way up until finally, when you are at scale, you then go for an IPO, where generally what you want to do is IPO when you can demonstrate that you've got a path to profit. And what that does, if you follow that sequence, it limits the amount of cash you'll burn, but it means that you have to be very smart, right? It means that you have to innovate with constraints. And I believe that the best way to innovate is with constraints. If you give people too much money, they'll waste it. You've seen it at Uber and some of these companies. They're just wasting money. It's just astonishing.
You know, I love what you're saying, or what I read in what you're saying between the lines is also that the entrepreneurial journey is actually an education. And you can't, you know, I did the MBA where you teach at the Gordon Institute. And if I look back at, I don't want to say my arrogance, but let's call it arrogance in the first couple of months, versus my holistic understanding of how all the parts fit together towards three-quarters of a program, it was completely different approach to the way I handled the absorption of material, of knowledge, the way I presented, the way I constructed my arguments, and so forth. And then I think this is where a lot of entrepreneurs, understandably in their excitement to grow and become very successful, don't see the entrepreneurial journey as really an education in business. What is your view on the educational factor, on the lessons?
So that's a lovely question, right? Because you're absolutely right. The process I've described to you is a process of actually eliminating a risk. And what is the elimination of risk? It's firstly discovering the risk and then finding ways to remove that risk. And so what is this process of identifying risk and eliminating risk? Well, it's the process of learning. And largely it's a process of, and this process of learning is mainly completed through a series of experiments, because you don't know, and there's no book. It's not like you can go and buy a book and learn, right? What you've got to do is say, well, I think maybe that people want to, call a car and get a ride. Okay, well, how do you know this is true? Well, I've got to go do some research. Okay, so I'm going to go to do a market analysis of the taxi industry. So what are you doing here? You're actually starting to begin a process of research. And then what you've got to do is say, well, I think it'll work. Let me build up a prototype. What is a prototype? Prototype is an experiment. Let me change my pricing. What is that? It's an experiment. Let me try some new mobile advertising. What is that? That's an experiment. So basically, entrepreneurship is a series of accelerated, targeted, and focused experiments aimed at learning as rapidly as possible. That's basically what entrepreneurship in my mind is. There's a wonderful term for this. It's called learning agility. And learning agility is the ability to identify exactly what the next thing is that you should learn. So it's always frustrates me because I've taught 50,000 people in my life, 50 to 60,000 students. And often what people don't realize is not everything that you learn is important now. I've learned calculus in school. I'm still waiting to use it, right? And I'm sure at some point I'm going to use, I learned geometry and trigonometry. I'm sure at some point in my life, I'm sure my teacher guaranteed me I would use, calculus and trigonometry. I still haven't, but I'm assuming at some stage I will, right? I learned, the discounted cash flow model, and I used it from the day that I was taught it up to today. I have used discounted cash flow, right? So the basic challenge that you have is most of the time we read, we attend courses, we're learning things that are not urgent for us now. They're important, but they're not urgent. The key about an entrepreneur is that he needs to learn things that are both urgent and important now. And in fact, that's the challenge, is you have to design these experiments so that you focus on the urgent, the simultaneously urgent and important, and you learn the critical things when you need to learn them. And so your emphasis of learning, I think, is spot on. It's absolutely right. But I want to give you that nuance that it's about targeted learning and through targeted experimentation, and only learning the things you absolutely need, because the vast majority of people are curious about everything. And so they waste a lot of time learning stuff they don't need now.
Yes.
Right? Does that make sense to you?
And I'd actually take that to a whole new level. I want to get your view on the SME support ecosystems. And it's a vague term referring to incubators, accelerators, enterprise development initiatives, and so forth. There's a huge amount of well-meaning individual and organizations wanting to support entrepreneurs and creating these incredibly fancy programs that spread over months or sometimes even years, with everything from HR to contracts and so forth. On the basis that entrepreneurship, one, you need to know what you need to know for now, not for when you do an IPO. And secondly, that it's a series of experiments. What advice would you give organizations that want to support entrepreneurs on how to do it effectively?
Look, I think going into an incubator and an accelerator, these are good things, right? I think pick it carefully. I'm not a big supporter of incubators and accelerators that take an equity stake in your business. I don't think that's fair. because you're actually abusing the startup. You know, they're desperate for help, and taking equity at that early stage is unfair. It's very unfair because you don't know what that equity is worth. You could be paying $1 billion, right, for free rent and free HR advice, because, you know, that's just not fair. So I think firstly, I'd be careful about that. But I do think that what firms should do is they should drive a discipline around deliverables. And what they should help the startups with is to say, look, I'm going to help you with basic services and support. So it depends what kind of startup you're talking about, right? If you're talking about a guy who just bought a franchise, that's not a startup, right? That's a small business. And they probably don't need much support. So the point is, if you buy a franchise, you get a packaged business in a box. That's the beauty about franchises. If you have a startup, you are building a franchise. You are building from scratch all the business rules, all the branding, all the operation from scratch. So the question is, do you need to solve all those problems yourself? No. Now this is where help enters this, right? So, you know, if you, it depends what role player you are. Are you a corporate? Are you a natural customer? Are you an investor? Are you a NGO? Depending on that, you can bring help to bear. In some cases, it might be cash. In other cases, it might be access to market. And I would argue that access to market is by far the most important value that you can bring to a startup. You know, cash, yes, cash is difficult to get, but if you have a compelling story, generally cash is not your problem. The guys that struggle with cash are the guys that either struggle with getting the right idea, or they struggle with execution on that idea. And so you get these grantrepreneurs, and grantrepreneurs go from grant event to grant event to grant, and all they're trying to do is raise money and they deliver nothing. So if you're able to come up with a compelling idea and execute on it, cash is not your problem. Your real problem is scaling. Your real problem is getting an opportunity to to test your product, and once it's tested, to scale it through somebody else's customer base. So my recommendation to companies generally is, be careful about who you support, be careful about what you give them. Often services could be more helpful than cash. So giving people access to free office space, for example, could be a better way of playing it than to give them access to money. Because the problem with money is you never know where these folks blow this money. And I want to just emphasize this. The vast majority of startups fail to launch. The vast majority. 90 to 95% of startups end up knowing. And, and nobody ever talks about this. No one talks about the massive and immense failure rate of startups, or they turn into a bit of a survivalist lifestyle business for someone. And I come across those all the time. I meet guys they've been in a business for 20 years doing the same thing. And they still call themselves a startup, but actually they're paying their rent, they're washing their face with this money, in which case that's fine. But I think, the people need to accept the vast majority of startups are going to fail. And what they as startup drivers and entrepreneurs need to decide is two things. One, is this business ever going to make money, and can I pivot it? And two, am I a natural fit to be an entrepreneur? Which, by the way, is a question that I find too many entrepreneurs never answer. They never ask themselves, are they a natural entrepreneur? Because many people aren't and should never be running their own business, but they fall in love with the concept, and often, ambition exceeds competence.
But on that, there's a lot of talk about, jobs on the way out. The future of work is B2B to SME. And yeah. So I agree that with your view that most people who think they can be entrepreneurs aren't suited or not ready yet. They haven't graduated through the entrepreneurship educational system. Yet there's no jobs. How do we play these two challenges? On the one hand, people aren't ready to be real entrepreneurs. On the other hand, there are no jobs. How do we reconcile these two contradicting? Do we just have a huge pot of people across the continent where there's no hope?
No. I think that I think your points are spot on, by the way. And I think it's going to get worse with the pandemic. You're going to see a massive hollowing out of corporates. So there's going to be a bleeding of jobs in the next 6 months. I mean, my expectation is that we could lose 30% of all corporate jobs in this country. 30% could just vanish overnight, never to come back. And what's going to happen with those people? What's going to happen with people who never had corporate jobs? So I think that there's a scale. And the scale is really, starting from the very bottom, where they're going to be some survivalists, then they're going to be lifestyle entrepreneurs, then they're going to be small SMEs who will service small local businesses, then they're going to be SMEs who can deliver a intangible service that can be delivered over the internet, and then they're going to be people who will actually have a proper startup, and then they're going to be people who go into the gig economy. And so there's a range of opportunities for small players, for individuals. Let's say individuals who can't get formal jobs, because I think you are right. We've reached the end of jobs. The future is about not jobs, but skills. And I think the future is also not about, it's probably goes a bit beyond that. It's also about parcels of work where, I'm publishing a book now, right? So when I get a book published, I'll ask one guy to come and please build me a website. Then I'll ask him to please, another person to help me with my social media plan. Then I'll get somebody else to help me with the editing. Then another guy will help me get the book published on Amazon. Then somebody else will help me with the art design for the cover. Do you see where I'm going? Now, so basically, I'm going to get this book published. I'm running this thing. I'm a registered company. Everyone that I'm working with is either a registered company or a sole proprietor of their own business. And everyone's getting piecemeal work from me. Now, the model that this describes, the model I'm describing to you, is it's around us every day, but most of us are blind. We don't see this model because most of us stop before this model happens or before the transparency appears. Let me explain. When you watch a movie and you see the sign, the end, most of us get up and go and make coffee or go to the toilet, right? Or we put the movie off. Because the most important part of that movie is after the end sign. Because it shows you written by, screenplay by, produced by, directed by, funded by, distributed by, the set was built by, the special effects were done by, these were the stunt guys, these were the firework guys, these were the guys. Do you understand what I'm saying? Movies by their very nature, for me, typify the future world of work. And the future world of work is a temporary organization that gathers around a particular opportunity. Everyone is focused on their speciality. Everyone gets credit at the end of the movie, right? And when the movie is done, people earn revenue in different ways. Some people get a revenue share on the movie. Some people get a share of profits. Some people may be paid per hour or be paid for the output that they delivered. And then the movie's over, it's wrapped up, and you break up the team. And for me, this concept of the movie is your future. The future of the world has got to be around that, because the beauty is that the person who's putting up the capital can minimize their risk, because then they're only paying for a small piece of work. They're working within an overall budget. They've got a time frame. They've got a launch window. Everybody gets paid. Everybody understands how much of risk they're taking. Everyone understands what the output is. You get delivery, and your chance of getting into the next movie is a function of how successful that last movie was. And that is the nature of the work going for, I think. And so everyone's got to think, what is your movie? What movie are you going to be in, and what role are you going to play in that movie? And that's what we all need to be architecting.
So I'm in love with that, because it very much goes to what I believe, but let's do it on a practical level. We are surrounded here in South Africa with townships, full of incredible people with attitude, personality, skills, interest. But we don't know where they are. We don't know who's doing what, who's good at that, because every entrepreneur pretends to be jack of all trades, pretends to be master of everything. So what advice do you give to young and not so young people regarding carving out their niche in the future of the world of movies and work?
Yeah, so that's a good point, right? I mean, and what should happen is that innovation and effort should naturally migrate to where the need is. So think about South Africa. One of the key things about South Africa that people don't get is South Africa was an ex-British colony. And there's a very common problem in all ex-British colonies. India has the same problem. Australia's got the same problem. Canada's got the same problem. Singapore's got the same problem. Hong Kong, all of these ex-British colonies have the same problem. Problems which you don't see in Japan, China, Germany, Italy, Spain, France. They don't have this problem. But all ex-English colonies have this problem, and that is a lack of artisan skills. There's a massive shortage of artisan skills. What did the British leave when they left? They left a beautiful legal system. They left a beautiful system for democracy, voting, elections, parliament. They left a lot of good governance, right? So you got legal and governance, and generally that's what most, if you go to India, they've got a beautiful legal and governance system, probably overdone. But all of these countries, these ex-British colonies, have very strong focus on media, transparency in the media, journalism, wonderful, beautiful, foundations for a society. The part they did not build is they built an education system that created, art graduates and commerce graduates and legal graduates. What they did not create, what Japan did, China did, Germany did, France, Italy, and Spain did, is they built an artisanal qualification system. So people learned how to weld and be carpenters, and they learned how to build and to craft. So we created a nation of craftsmen. People often talk about England as being a nation of shopkeepers. And that is absolutely true, because they don't make anything in England, not anymore, which is odd, because England started, the Industrial Revolution started in England. And so for me, South Africa's opportunity, and you see this when you cross Africa, is we need plumbers, we need diesel mechanics, we need electricians, we need people who can fix microwave ovens and cell phones and people who can recharge batteries, and so there's a wonderful opportunity in South Africa to repair, to fix, to upgrade, and to build from the ground up. Now, as a nation, that's not in our culture. It used to be. In our culture, I think when we were building our own power stations at decent prices and within decent project timelines. But it's something I think we need to go back to. We need to go back to those roots, and we need to start formalizing those skills.
But I'm in love with what you say. About a year ago, we started writing a book about a township called Modimolle. Well, actually, it's a city called Modimolle, but the township. And we started profiling the entrepreneurs, and we're blown away by the focus skill of some of these entrepreneurs. And yet nobody knows about them. Your advice on the back of this specialization, of this artisanal, a lot of young people might listen to this and say, yeah, but that's not glamorous. That's not building Uber. That's not going to make me rich overnight. If you could grab these young people by the lapel and shake them up a little bit, what would you tell them?
Well, if you don't work, you don't eat. And that's true in Nigeria, and that's true in India. South Africa has lots of social grants, but in countries where if you don't work, you don't eat is true. You have a highly productive culture because everyone's focusing on working and making money to pay for tonight's meal. So I would start with that. Survival is your first priority. Once you've got that, you can then start looking into, let me get into the digital economy. So step one should be, is really get what's called a banker. A banker, I mean, my uncle used to bet on the horses. And whenever he betted, he would say, this is a banker. And I would say, what's a banker? He said, a banker means if I put my money on this, I'm guaranteed to earn something. This horse can't not end in the top 3. It's a banker. So you always you take what's called a place bet, and that horse is going to come out in the top 3. You know it. So in life, you should always take a banker. You should always put your money on something that says, you know what, if everything else fails, I've got this backstop. This is going to keep me. Everyone should have this. Because when everything else in your life disappears, you've got this one thing you can go back to. So find that one thing. For each of us, it's going to be different. Whatever that is, start there. Because once you've got that, you've got a foundation in your life. And then let's say you become a person who's a plumber, right? And then what you can do is you can say, well, I'm a plumber. I'm going to help other people become plumbers. So maybe I can now build out an online plumbing school, or I can build out a training school, or I can build out kits, or I can kit out vans and sell these vans to other plumbers. Or I can buy tools and help plumbers become more successful. Or I can build an Uber of plumbers. But you see, often in life, success comes from a deeper understanding of an industry. So you got to pick an industry and develop a deeper understanding. It's very rare for someone to suddenly come in and transform brain surgery if you've never done brain surgery before. right? It is rare. It does happen in business that sometimes people enter an industry from outside the industry. But what they do is they come in and they get a deep understanding of the industry. Then they disrupt the industry. So disruption and digital businesses come from a deep understanding. And so the real problem I think that you are talking to is the fact that the youth don't like committing, because there's this fear of missing out. If I commit to being a plumber or learning how to bake bread, I could be losing out on something else. And so we tend to flit like a butterfly from idea to idea. We never commit to one thing. And the secret in life is you got to commit to something. And so everyone's got to become famous for one thing. And you got to figure out, Andy Wall says we're all going to get our 15 seconds or 15 minutes of fame. What are you going to be famous for? Figure that thing out. Because once you figure that out, you can build your foundation. And then you can go into the digital economy after that. And I'm telling you, there are going to be some very exciting digital businesses built on top of very boring businesses. I know a guy who built a business worth 200 million rand. And all he does is when your geyser bursts, he sends out a request to a whole bunch of plumbers saying which plumber is available to access this geyser. He sold the service to all the banks. So if you have geyser insurance on your house, the minute that geyser pops, right, his engine kicks in and sorts that problem out for you. And he rates the plumbers and he scores the plumbers and they get different rates, etc. And Rich has built this amazing business that just sends plumbers to fix geysers, right? And he's not a plumber, right? But he found a need, he immersed himself in the business, learned what problems the insurance companies were trying to solve, and he realized that 100,000 geysers burst in Johannesburg every year. 100,000, right? So he found a problem of scale. He found a problem that's not being resolved. He saw that the big insurance companies were struggling with this. And when people get the geysers blown, they were standing for days without getting it fixed. And he basically short-circuited this entire thing and built a solution that's now worth a couple of 100 million rand. So I think great things can come, but you got to build that foundation first.
I love it, and it speaks so much. I spend a lot of my time on LinkedIn as a platform of networking. And one of my observations is always that I, looking at somebody's LinkedIn profile, have no clue what they're actually good at. There's whether it's your banner or about you, is to say, I am brilliant at this. This is my expertise from day one. This is what you should call me for. And if I can't understand it from a LinkedIn, I don't know how to introduce you to potential clients of mine. And I love it.
I love that comment, Jörg.
I love it.
I love that comment. You know the problem that all these folks who are about to lose their jobs in big corporates are going to have is they all have such funny titles. So what do you do? I'm in charge of compliance, in an audit function. And what do you do? I'm in charge of, collateral in the marketing team, etc. And the part of the problem that all of these folks are going to have is they're going to have to figure out where in the credits of the movie their name's going to appear. Because it's not going to be because I'm in charge of compliance, right? You must ask the question, where are you going to appear on that list of credits? What is you? And each of them, and I think there's going to be 1 million people. In 6 months from now, you and I should chat. 6 months from now, 1 million people are going to be sitting back thinking, maybe I should go back and learn how to be a plumber. Because I think that's what's exactly going to happen in this country. We've got no choice. We have to get back to the basics because, in a sense, if a country enters a recession, right, we can't afford to be a throwaway culture anymore. And in a throwaway culture, things that we already own have to be nursed, and we've got to keep these assets for as long as they can. We're going to have to become a maintenance culture. We're going to have to maintain, repair, and support whatever we have. We're going to have to fix roads and fix street lights and fix microwaves. And we don't have those skills. And that's where I think this country is going to go to for the next 5 years. So I think, people need... Yeah.
But Herman, that's actually fantastic news in a way. I'm not saying that the process won't be painful for many, and not making it light of those who really can't even, who are struggling right now to even have food on the table. But in a way, the world was insane based on this pyramid scheme of non-stop consumerism. In a way, this reset button could be, as painful as it is, the best thing that has happened to us.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I think there's a number of benefits. I wrote a LinkedIn post on the benefits of the pandemic, and there are many, many plus factors. One of them is we are going to stop importing strategic items from other countries. You know, we have to make personal protective equipment in South Africa. We have to. Well, these factories don't exist. We have to learn how to make masks in South Africa. You know, my wife and daughter were making masks for medical practitioners at home. And my mother-in-law did the same thing. And housewives all over the area where I live are making thousands of masks that they're giving to doctors and nurses because we can't import them, right? And so why can't we import them? Because China needs them for itself. And so part of the problem that you have is in a crisis when everybody needs the same thing, you suddenly realize, wow, I can't buy this. I better make it myself. So I think the first thing that's going to happen is there's going to be a number of industries classified as strategic industries, which will always be made in South Africa. We should always make our own vaccine. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but there are only 12 vaccine plants in the world. One of them is in South Africa. Now, when this plant was opened, you know, 5 or 8 years ago, people laughed and said, South Africa is going to make its own vaccines. What a joke. Actually, the big problem you're going to have is if we all need a vaccine twice a year, America is going to need 600 million vaccines. Well, America is not geared for that because America is designed to pump out 5 million vaccines for newborn children every year and to give vaccines to people over the age of 65. Basically, America can produce, you know, 10 to 20 million vaccines a year. South Africa is going to need 60 million. Where are we going to get that from? So we have to start local manufacture, local production. And so I believe the first thing that's going to happen is we're going to start seeing a lot more local production happening, number one. Number two, the other reason why it's going to start happening locally is with the weak rand, import replacement makes a lot of sense. And all of a sudden, local production and local manufacture is going to become very important. And so I really believe South Africa is going to go back to the grassroots around production, manufacturing, factories. You know, we hollowed out the industrial base of this country over the last 30 years, and we have to fill it out again. So I believe there's greater opportunity coming out of this pandemic.
I absolutely love it. And I just want to refer back to, I suppose, for those who, you know, don't know where to start, for the millions of people who are going to be going, okay, now what do I do on a practical level? What do I do tomorrow morning? The Ugandan Trade Investment Authority released a wonderful document about 2-3 months ago on 500 businesses you can start in a township. And it's like whether you start a little tomato, but it tells you the costing, what do you need, how does it work, how do you price it, how do you sell it, how much money can you make? It's absolutely, and I think this is what's missing in our world, is frames of reference. We are bombarded by Uber, by Apple, by Google, by Facebook, but we're not bombarded by practical startup, practical businesses that we can do tomorrow morning. And
yeah. Well, yeah. So think about this, right? In the middle of this crisis, the most useless people have been movie stars, singers, and famous rich people, and models, and fashion. So in other words, all these things, all these people who earn huge amount of money are useless in a crisis, right? That's the first problem. Secondly, if you think about it, you can't eat Google, right? You can't use Facebook to light up your house. And so when we get back to first principles, you start to realize, actually, the person who can bake bread is more important than the person who can make the user interface on Facebook better. And you suddenly realize that actually you've pushed some of these models too far. So the fact that, you know, Facebook and Google have the valuations that they have is ludicrous in my view, when we can't even bake bread and we can't even purify water and we can't even generate electricity. So I believe that there's going to be, after this pandemic, there's going to be a reversion back to basics, because we've suddenly begun to realize we need to value medical workers and sanitation workers and retail workers far more than somebody who works, you know, at Facebook. How critical has Facebook been in this? Nothing. How critical has the retail worker been in getting you your groceries, your truck driver? The growth in job ads for truck drivers in America went up 1,000%. 1,000%, right? And the number of jobs that were available in advertising crashed from 100 down to like 5. And so, you know, as a percentage. So basically, you can see what's happening. What's happening is we are now reverting to basics. And in a world of basics, things that are substantial and real and tangible are going to be more important than things that are virtual for a while. It might be that in 10 years' time or 5 years' time, we're back to where we were. But certainly for the next 5 years, I think you're going to find we're all going to pivot back to value.
I'm in love with what you're saying. And I When I now take you back a little bit to your, I mean, you're an anomaly in many ways. You know, who the hell graduates from university at the age of 19? Um, and so I'm cautious of asking you the next question, but if you could take young Herman by the shirt and shake him up, what are some of the advice you would give your younger self in the entrepreneurial route? Things that by now, with the hindsight of perspective and experience, what are some of advice you would give to your younger self?
No, I think that's a great question. I mean, I guess there's three things I've always thought I could have had when I was younger. The one was I wished I'd had a better understanding of deeper finance than I did when because I studied as an engineer. So I did a 4-year engineering degree. I knew how to analyze stresses through an I-beam, and how to design trusses, and how to analyze flow of liquids, etc., and to do math. But I couldn't do the same thing with finance. So the one thing I think is I would have done finance earlier. The second thing I guess I would have maybe spent more time on is personal interactions and building up a better ability to communicate. So communication skills and interaction skills, those soft skills that help you sell an idea and help you to operate with more finesse and nuance around communication, reading body language, and things like that. And then I guess the third thing, I guess, if I could have understood better the startup world, I guess that would have been a huge help, because I've had a lot of ideas over the years that I never pursued because I never realized how powerful they could have been over time. So, those are the three things I would have loved to have had. So the advice I would have given to myself would be go get that. And I think, the trick is, of course, would my life have turned out differently if I'd done that? I guess, that's a moot point, right? I love the way my life's turned out. But I think for many people, I have a daughter who's a lawyer, but she doesn't really understand finance much. I have a son who's an end-to-end system developer. He understands, the world of finance and tech, but he doesn't understand the world of marketing, for example, right? And so you realize that one of the biggest problems in the world today is we all make two big mistakes. The first mistake we make is we pick a career when we are too young. Mm-hmm. It's ludicrous to choose a career when you are, I had to choose when I was, I think, 14 or 15, I had to choose what I was going to study at university. When I was, I think, 11, I had to pick what subjects I was going to study at high school. Who the heck knows what you want to study at high school, right? At 11, right? It's stupid. And then whatever subject you pick when you're at 11 locks you on a path for high school, that locks you on a path for university, that locks you on a path for a profession. And before you know it, you're 32, you're married with 2 children, and then you realize you hate your life. And so part of the problem is, the first problem we have is we pick our careers too young. The second problem we have, I think, is we end up becoming specialists. And so we end up knowing a lot about one thing. And many people will say, I'm a doctor, being a doctor isn't one thing. So if you'll grant me this, that engineering is one thing, medicine is one thing, right? Marketing is one thing. Very few of us achieve true multifunctional capability when we're young. And so what we need to do actually is create mini MBAs for people so that they can look at what the world looks like when they're young and then pick. So give people a sense of what, globalization means, what marketing means, what product means, what a startup is, and then pick where you want to focus. Part of the problem is we pick when we don't know. I meet a lot of very unhappy doctors and lawyers and accountants, all of whom have said to me, I wish I didn't do what I did, but I picked, and now I'm stuck. I'm stuck in being a lawyer, and it's very hard to change course. So, if we could fix those two things, I think that would be fantastic for the world.
So it mirrors a lot of my attitude, and I am, despite my love for universities, I went to a number of them around the world, undergraduate, graduate courses, and so forth. I'm, in a way, allergic to universities. I prefer things like the Gibbs, is it called the PDBA, Postgraduate Diploma or something. 9 months of business skills, so that by the time you come out, you have a much better practical understanding of all aspects of business. So I'm in love with what you're saying on a very practical level, what would you advise a young person to do then? Is it, you know, I'm talking about a young person in the African context, meaning not everybody has the money to go to Gibbs or to go to UCT and so forth. What would you advise them in terms of getting this all-encompassing education while focusing on a specialization? What should they do tomorrow morning?
So tomorrow, what they've got to do is stop trying to go to university. I'm a professor at 2 universities. I lecture at 5, both in South Africa, 2 universities outside of SA. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but actually, you know, everything that we teach you at university is available online. I can never understand why people burn down campuses in this country, you know, because we should shut down all universities in this country. Apart from the fact that people will stop burning them, they'll actually get a very good education online. And if you want to burn down your classroom and you're studying online, you're going to burn down your own house. Right? That's what I think we should try to put in place. Now, and the reason I'm saying this is, you know, I sit on an advisory committee for the engineering faculty at WITS. And I made the point, we produce 300 graduates. We have 300 students in first year every year at WITS University in engineering. I said, but you know, I can get an engineering degree online for free. And I just went online, I Googled free engineering degree, and I got 6 different universities in the world give you a free engineering degree online. So the point is, people will argue, yeah, but I don't get a certificate. I said, well, does it matter, right? So get started, start learning, because remember, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, and Amazon don't need a degree anymore. They want to know, can you code? And what's your attitude? What's your behavior? And can you code? Based on those 2 things, they give you a job. I said, that's the future of work. It's not, do I have a piece of paper? So get online and start aggregating skills. The internet is massive. Nobody's found the last page of the internet yet. So I'm not sure if it's infinite, but I'm sure it's out there somewhere. But the point I'm making is that there's a vast body of education available for free. So anybody who says to me, well, I can't afford to go to university, just, you know, get access to data. So for me, the most important thing is we really need to give people, everyone in this country should get a free smartphone, even if it's a second-hand phone. And we should all get free access to educational sites. We zero rate all educational sites, and everybody should get a free smartphone, even if it's a second-hand phone. And in my view, then nobody has an excuse not to be studying and not to be developing skills. Because if you're sitting back waiting for the future to come to you, you know, I'm sorry, but the future is happening all over the world. It's just coming. The future arrives at different speeds in different places, right? And so the future is arriving. Those people who are online studying, they're getting to the future first. And so my advice to people is, you know, stop waiting for education to come to you. Go find it. It's free.
I absolutely love it. Herman, thank you so much for your time. This was truly Entrepreneurship Unplugged, practical, high level, and hopefully a wake-up call to a lot of you that the route to becoming master of your own destiny is not impossible. If you can't afford data, go next to a Wi-Fi hotspot. Second-hand smartphone, you can get brand new smartphones for 3,000 Rand, second-hand ones for 1,000 Rand, that do the job brilliantly. The opportunities are there. We just got to get off our couches and forget about how things were done in the past. Herman, thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome, York. Thank you so much. Take care.